To Vertical Playpen. I am your host, Phil, and I'm joined by High Five's very own Jamie Thibodeau, and also we're joined by Dr. Travis Park, who is the chair of the National FFA Board of Directors, and we're going to be talking about the connection between the FFA and experiential education. So first, Travis, I'm going to pass to you. If you could introduce to our listeners who are unfamiliar to FFA, briefly what FFA is and what is your mission?
So, the National FFA Organization is an agricultural leadership organization for middle grades and high school students. Our membership ranges from fifth grade up to 21 years of age, so a little bit even beyond high school. We're nearly 100 years old. FFA was started in many states, New York. One of those, Virginia, was one of the early adopters back in the late 90s. So our official start date is 1928. So we're approaching the 100th anniversary, which we're proud of because not a lot of organizations really of any kind hit that century milestone. And we'll be celebrating over the next couple of years doing just that. The mission of the National FFA organization is to develop students' potential for premier leadership, personal growth, and career success through agricultural education. All of our students are enrolled in high school or middle school agricultural education programs, and we have 1,027,273 FFA members across the nation who are all engaged on basically a daily basis with agriculture studies in middle schools and high schools. And that comprises about 10,000 programs and 15,000 agriculture teachers in all 50 states and a couple of U.S. territories.
That's awesome. As I looked at the website and I was going through looking at the mission, I noticed a couple of statements that really stood out to me as it relates to our work. To accomplish its mission, FFA develops interpersonal skills in teamwork, communications, human relations, and social interaction. Well, that's essentially what the role in experiential education does. And I also want to highlight the motto, which is learning to do, doing to learn, and then there's earning to live, living to serve. But that first one, learning to do and doing to learn, wow, how that super lines up with experiential ed. Jamie, I wonder if you would like to take the next question.
Yeah, I mean, I was in FFA in high school in the state of Maine, way up in Caribou, and we had a chapter, and that was my first introduction to things. My ag teacher, he was a great mentor of mine, and from there, I went to Oswegatchie Educational Center in Krogan, New York. They're owned by the New York State FFA Foundation, and did a conference there, and then I ended up going to work there. And then my wife, Amber, at the time went to Cornell University. And Travis, correct me, what was your title at Cornell at the time that I met you?
Probably a professor and director of our ag education teacher preparation program there at Cornell.
Yeah, so in a long
Yeah.
about road, that's eventually how I ended up meeting Travis, and now he's working for National FFA. Um, and I just kind of want to see what your thoughts are, about FFA using experiential education to teach your students, and maybe give us a couple examples of how that affects, a high schooler's life, or something like that.
Yeah, Jamie, thank you for that question. So, agricultural education, as I said a moment ago, right? Affiliated with the public and private systems, even more so now, and homeschools. But there's a classroom laboratory component. So, from an experiential education standpoint, a teacher might teach theory and concepts about animal science or horticulture, natural resources, mechanics in a classroom or lab setting, and then go outside to a greenhouse where students might learn how to take plant cuttings in the classroom, but they actually perform the plant cuttings in the greenhouse, or learn how to weld and then go to a shop and actually weld, or natural resources, learn about pollinators and then go out somewhere on the school grounds and build a pollinator garden. So experiential learning is tied into the classroom learning activities. And then we have the FFA that brings in the leadership development component, and that's all experiential as well. Students prepare speeches and compete against each other to demonstrate knowledge about agriculture. And the third component is really probably publicly a little lesser known, and that is what we call supervised agricultural experiences. And so each student enrolled in ag education and participating in FFA is also expected to have a an experience program that's related to agriculture that's supervised by the ag teacher or sometimes an employer outside of the school day. And some examples of those SAE is what we call them, might be in a very traditional sense, a student would raise crops or livestock, raise some beef cattle or several acres of corn. But today, even students enrolled in agriculture in urban and suburban settings are still engaged in the experiential side of agriculture. And so, like, we live here in a suburb of Raleigh, North Carolina, and my daughters, their SAE to be a member of FFA and to participate in our ag classes is to raise honeybees. So we've got 5 or 6 backyard honeybee hives. So my oldest daughter, that was really the essence of her project. She learned about pollinators in her ag class, developed this honeybee keeping project at home. She then interned at Duke Gardens in their natural pollinator section and learned about the plants that attract pollinators here in central North Carolina. And now she's majoring in horticulture at NC State, focused on pollinators and the bee populations. So it all started in the classroom, but then she used this experience outside of the classroom at home to further refine those interests in an area related to agriculture. And so we see students doing that all the time, all across the country. And they might intern at a florist shop or a greenhouse. Sometimes we just want students to get a work experience. They may be bagging groceries or working retail at a Subway or a McDonald's. That gets them foot in the door to start earning some money, and then hopefully they can transition to a experience that's a little more aligned with ag and natural resources.
Yeah, when I was in high school, my supervised agriculture experience was turf and lawn management, and one of the guys I was working with ended up going to work for the Red Sox. And the year that they broke the curse and won the World Series, he's the one that designed the logo that they cut into the outfield.
Really?
Yeah, he was a great guy to talk to. He was a senior when I was a freshman in high school, but just goes to show a small supervised agriculture experience can turn into some great career.
Yeah. We have a lot of students. It's for the majority of students, it's an interest. It helps them focus in on agriculture. But for a handful, more than a handful, right? It really does develop into a career, whether it's through college or straight into the workforce. Students find that they have a talent and interest in an area of agriculture. And through that, it's really that experience. There's a lot of us that really believe, we love the FFA, we love the Blue Jackets. The classroom education is where you build those bonds with your other classmates and your teachers. But the secret sauce really is that experiential learning component where we see our most thriving ag education programs doing the best work to develop students and provide opportunities for students are where they have the ag teachers have fostered a robust supervised agriculture experience program. It gets students out in the community, develops their agriculture learning that they can bring back to the classroom and then capitalize on for careers.
Yeah. So I want to circle back a little bit. You quickly brushed upon some leadership conferences and, speaking events and things like that students do. And I think in our industry, we do with experiential learning, there's a lot of like conference-based learning that happens for our educators and all the people that are teaching in this industry. And feel free to add on to this question if you want. Could you just, because I've lived it, I know that it connects a little bit, and I wouldn't be the same public speaker I am today or the same type of person without going to those many, many conferences led by, whether it's the national officers or I know you guys have a lot of full-time staff that just do conferences. Maybe speak a little bit more to that. And then one question to add on to that too. Explain what a national officer is, because I think most people wouldn't know what that is.
Yeah. So from a leadership development standpoint, and I would participate like you did, Jamie, in FFA up through high school, but seeing it now secondhand through my daughter's experiences has enlightened me even more. But at the middle school and high school level, we call those the FFA, we call them FFA chapters, right? Not necessarily clubs, but chapters, little difference. But those FFA chapters elect officers like you would class officers or club officers. But because a student participates in that ag class for 4 years through high school and votes on their peers to be the leaders of the club or the chapter, they think really develop some mentorship among their peers and they understand leadership because they see older classmates serve in officer positions. And then we have that same structure at many states do at a regional level throughout the state, where they elect officers at the regional level to conduct the work of the organization. There are state FFA officers, like your wife Amber was a state FFA officer there in New York. And so she went around for a year and presented leadership workshops and gave speeches to high schools across the state of North Carolina. And so those high school students were seeing Amber, right, I think she was a year out of high school. So as a college freshman,
I think
investing
so.
back
Yeah.
in them. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we have national officers.
Yeah, I was a senior in high school when I did a year of service to the state of Maine too, as a
Okay, so you
state
were a senior. Yeah.
officer.
So you're
Yeah.
going around and you're, as a senior in high school, how cool is that you're going around the state speaking to FFA chapters and presenting leadership workshops? You're a couple of years older than those students. And I don't see that anywhere else in our school system, where those students who are peers, but just a little older, are investing back into the younger generations by serving as a state officer. And so I think that's powerful. It gives students, younger students, a role model to look up to. Because as you travel around, you were on your absolute best behavior, I'm sure, and well polished as a public speaker, and wanting to share your knowledge with other students. And so that can be really powerful. The national level, we elect 6 national FFA officers each year, and they are 1 to 2 years removed from high school. Most have all been state FFA officers. And so they take a year off from college and travel all across the nation. They'll put on about 250,000 miles speaking with other FFA members in high schools. They'll speak at state FFA conventions. They'll also visit with policymakers and leaders in the ag industry, corporate sponsors of FFA, to learn a leadership themselves that they can then take back and share with others, but also promote the National FFA organization.
Yeah,
So
you
there's
were
this
a national
leadership structure
officer
that,
in your younger
pardon, go ahead,
years.
Jamie.
I said you were a national officer in your younger years, right?
I was. It's been a year or two ago, but I served as the National FFA president. And, I got a lot out of it, as I soon realized what I got mostly was just a lot of fantastic connections and friends and mentors all across the country. And, even at 50 something years old, serving in this capacity as board chair, I still call upon those mentors that I made a connection with, in the early 90s, to help provide some guidance for the organization even today. And so the value of mentors and leaders through developing leadership, to me, leadership is experiential education. And as chair of the board of directors for an organization that affects over 1 million lives each year and has countless individuals nearly engaged in this process, the challenges we see are pretty complex. And so I have to call upon other leaders to provide advice.
Yeah.
Literally every day.
I always find it very impressive. So to just give a little bit more weight to a national officer, you have a chapter that might have 30 to 200 students in it, and 6 students get elected to be chapter officers. And then from there, usually a chapter officer wants to run for a state office. So someone like a state of New York has over 1,000 members, 2,000 members, maybe. Texas, what would you say Texas has for membership?
About 180,000.
About 180,000. So I'm probably way off on the New York number. Amber will tell me that later.
Yeah. You'd have to check. I don't know. I think 7,000-8,000 at least.
Yeah. That sounds more right. It's been a while, but so it's like 6 of those people get chosen to be state officer, and a lot of them, each state tries to pick one person to send to nationals to be elected for a national officer. So there's like 50 to 75,000 students at national convention. At least when I went, 15 years ago. And then, 6 people out of there get chosen to be a national officer. So like out of the 1 million people that are in the organization today, and they go around and do conferences like we do conferences, but they're doing them for high school students and getting them to experientially learn through play, through all these other program goals that National FFA has set up.
Yeah, it's just so powerful. My own children have participated in sports, volleyball and swimming and that kind of thing through the school, but there's not this peer-to-peer leadership development that we find many places. And FFA does it pretty well, we think really well, right? But you go to these conferences, and when Jamie Thibodeau, who's 1 year out of high school as a state FFA officer, is saying, "Hey, let's think about the goals that you want to set for your career. Let's think about conflict resolution. Let's unpack some of the things you're seeing in your school, and how can we make your FFA chapter work a little more smoothly?" It's really powerful. We had a weekend conference just this last weekend, and as we're checking out, I asked a couple of students, just said, "How did you like the conference?" They're like, "We love sitting down in the workshops and writing down some of our goals and ideas and sharing those with other people." And on one hand, I'm thinking, this is just like school. And you wouldn't find, on Thursday, they wouldn't have went home to their parents and said, "We like sitting in and writing some ideas down and sharing them with our peers." But because they're, in FFA, and they're kind of independent in that workshop setting, and it's not the teacher asking them to do something. It's really a slightly older peer and mentor asking them to think about leadership. Is, again, impactful, meaningful, and powerful.
I'm really struck by what you were referencing around, like, that in the public school world you don't see this elsewhere. And the reason I'm struck by it is because in England, and I not to promote English educational system, but we have processes called prefects, which are peer leaders. It's almost, if you've watched Harry Potter, it's like
Yeah.
the older kids who guide the younger kids. So I was a senior prefect in my school. Let me, because I'm intrigued by this, and I also I note that. So the FFA is at fault for Jamie's confidence. Great. I'm adding that into double-edged sword
That's
there,
true.
potentially.
That's true.
But just go on to that, because High Five, our motto is connect, empower, lead. And that empower part was really intentional for us in Adventure Ed. We allow our participants, we teach our students how to belay and how to do those at-risk tasks, because we think that it's important to teach that level of responsibility. What do you see as the real benefit of empowering your students to take leadership roles? What do you see from them looking down to the younger members?
I think in FFA, Jamie, you might chime in here too. I think we give our students a lot of responsibility, right? State FFA officers are 18 or 19 years old, and the state staff send them out to travel across the state independently. Sometimes there's an adult in charge and they go through training, but they're out there working independently. And like the workshop sessions this weekend, state officers were leading those sessions with members that were just 1 or 2 years younger than them. And those members from all across the state gathered in the same room, went to the same workshop, but their ag teacher wasn't in the room with them. There wasn't a there were adults on site, of course, right? But it was peer-to-peer empowerment, I think, of leadership. And so a state officer will share some of their experiences and what they learned through FFA or working with other people in clubs and through school. They share that very honestly and openly with the students who are just a little younger than them. And I think that's empowering, that it's, for the most part, a very student-led organization. And the peer-to-peer leadership models are definitely student to student. It's not an adult telling our FFA members to set goals and think about their values and how those play out in a conversation or a conflict. It's student to student. Would you agree with that, Jamie, or am I off base?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good example as it starts from the beginning. Our chapter would have a monthly meeting, and the teacher didn't stand up in front of the classroom and go through the agenda. The students are in charge. They do opening ceremonies and they say their part. The president stands in front of everybody and goes through the agenda and uses parliamentary procedure to conduct the meetings. What other high schoolers do you know that? I mean, there's probably some adults that don't know what
Most
parliamentary
adults, yeah.
procedure is. And it puts a lot of the weight of the organization on the student, because they run it, they do the activities. I don't know if you guys still do Food for America Day. Is that
Chapters call it by different names, but yeah,
yeah,
something similar.
yeah, that's what we did. And it was basically, we brought in first and second graders to the high school, and we set up stations about where your food comes from. And our ag teacher did very little but just like make sure we were headed in the right direction. But all the high school students were in charge of their stations and getting all of that set up for these kids, to teach these kids some basics about where their food comes from. So it's very much empowering the students to lead their peers and help teach each other.
And we take that,
Yeah.
Phil, you said the motto, learning to do, doing to learn. That those two statements, those two parts of the motto are really permeate our culture as an organization, that we expect students to do the work and do the learning, and there's guidance of a teacher if the wheels fall off, if an animal escapes from the Food for America Day or something, there's an adult there, like at the hotel, but all the delivery is student to student, peer to peer.
And I
And from a
wonder
leadership
if
standpoint, that's pretty powerful.
oh, incredibly powerful. And I wonder if you go back to your story of those students saying like they wrote down goals and you referenced, would they do it in school? I think the difference is their peers. It's the difference is they're being guided by their students. I know for a fact that I've got a 9-year-old daughter. If I tell her to do something, it's her dad telling her to do something. If a teacher tells her to do something, but if a friend says, hey, you should pick that up, she'd pick it up in a second. So I
Yeah.
think that sometimes the power of the peer is underutilized in a lot of programming that we work with. So I ask listeners to consider, how might you empower your students to take more of a leadership role in some of your work, and you will see an increase in responsibility and increase engagement if you allow those people to take a role.
And I think our young people are pretty capable. They need a little guidance, they need a little preparation, but they are so sharp today and have so many capabilities that we can really leverage that to good potential for them and our world, honestly. Yeah. The other thing that's cool about a lot of the camps and conferences that we have and is that you pull students in from across the state or across the region, and that gives a student an opportunity to, in a small way, redefine themselves a little bit. And so if they, however they were at their home high school, when they go to a camp that is held across the state, they have to make some friends and then branch out of their comfort zone a little bit, but it gives them a chance to kind of re-identify if they want to, and then make those connections, those networks of other peers who will follow them if they remain in agriculture or really any walk of life, but especially agriculture. Those folks will be peers really for life. I mean, Jamie and I are I don't know if the first time we met, Jamie, was through Amber. I think the first time we met, you were at one end of a belay rope and I was trusting you with my life.
You'd probably remember that more than me. I've belayed a lot of people.
It was terrifying.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it could have
Yeah.
been during NLCSO, which is the National Leadership Conference for State Officers. I mean, that's how I stumbled upon camp life and working at a summer
Yeah.
camp. So and that way, working at a summer camp and experiential education and FFA, they're all the same thing to me,
Yeah.
because they've all come through this direct path down. And yeah, I worked on that ropes course there for many, many years. And you and many national officers and state officers from around New England and the country, they all came to that camp. New York's pretty lucky. They're one of the few states that have a camp owned by their FFA foundation.
Far away, the largest and most beautiful, I think.
Yeah,
And best
it is.
staff. And
It's
best
pretty
staff, of
awesome
course.
there. Yeah.
But even the leadership, there at Oswegatchie with the high ropes course and all the experiences to get out in nature, even a conference in a hotel. I said students thought and wrote down a lot of their plans, but there's interactive activities, and we try to use as many play and game settings to bring out leadership concepts for our students so that they can experience, maybe feel uncomfortable with communication or with getting close to another person, but navigate that so that they can develop their own potential.
Awesome. So what I'm going to do is I just want to mention this to the listeners. I'm going to stick all of the FFA information into the description of this episode so that folks can check them out. And if this is new to you, new information, I encourage you to look through their resources, because there is huge connection to the work that we do and the work that the FFA is doing. If we could conclude, Travis, what would be to the listening group who are really like experiential educators, what should the educator, what can we get out of the FFA? What can that relationship be between the work of the FFA and maybe experiential educators?
I think there's good working relationships. I know a lot of our chapters will engage in chapter officer retreats or chapter retreats and utilize some of what I envision experiential educators, their facilities and that, whether it's a high ropes course or a camp setting. So that's a great opportunity, a reciprocal kind of relationship. And then the other thing is, gosh, We try to pick up ideas from experiential education and experiential learning concepts that I think at its root, our theories and the foundation is real similar between agricultural education and experiential learning through groups like yours.
I have to
Yeah,
go
Jamie.
back just real quick. Like, if you find, you want your children or someone else's children or your students to be in FFA, really look up, on the national website, your high school might have an FFA chapter. I will say that the teachers that teach agriculture and run an FFA chapter are probably some of the most dedicated people I've ever met in my entire life. They spend lots of weekends and evenings not getting paid extra to mentor these students and help them run contests and bring them places such as camps and leadership conference and national FFA convention, state FFA convention. So, there lots of great people. Agriculture teachers are kind of one of a kind for sure.
Couldn't agree more. Ag teachers are our point of contact. FFA offers a lot of great programs and opportunities, but it really takes that ag teacher and in many ways dedicated alumni and supporters locally to provide opportunities for students. It takes a village, and FFA supporters and the ag teachers are really tremendous assets in that village.
Excellent. So thank you to Travis for bringing this information and sharing clearly what is you're very passionate about. It resonates off the screen. Jamie, thank you for the connection. And also
Thanks, Phil.
to High Five, our podcast's biggest fan, Amber Thibodeau, who told me I have to mention her name on the podcast. She's been mentioned at least 5 times. She'll be pleased. And be sure to check us out on the next episode. Thanks so much.
Thank you.